Good morning. Great to be back at Mr. Small's Theater. This is Geick's Got Game on the River's Edge. I'm your host, Matt Geica. It's been 3 weeks since I came to you live from in studio. A hearty thank you to Alan Saunders and my producer, Brian Crawford, to my left, for keeping the show going in my absence on the road covering the Penguins back-to-back weeks. I was in Boston for Black Friday. That was fun. I was in Buffalo last Friday. Also enjoyable. I'm not going to put down Buffalo at all. I'm not one of those people. If you listen to last week's show, you know I enjoy it. Very manageable sized city. No rush hour traffic to speak of. Hey, I'm in on that. I don't care. I'll put up with the crap winters and 1,000 inches of snow per winter. That's totally fine with me. Not fine with Brian Crawford. I'm sure we'll hear from him about that very soon. But anyway, this is my show. Unconventional sports talk is what I like to call it. Coming to you every Friday at 10 a.m. live, and it's available via the archive version. Podcast page at riversedgepgh.com is where you can find all of my shows. I'm creeping very close to 100, so I got to get ready for the centennial edition, in fact. But there have been a couple of times I've been out of studio, and to get reacquainted with Mr. Smalls is enjoyable. We have a wonderful, wonderful atmosphere here to broadcast from. It's nice and toasty on this cold December morning, too, which is also a nice benefit. Reminder, you can find us on basically any place you want to find podcasts or live streams. We're all over the internet. We can be piped straight to your device, or you can go the old way, old-fashioned internet, riversedgepgh.com. We are broadcasting on Facebook Live as well. Thank you for watching. If you are watching, I have my spirit gear on, if you will. I will not be an unbiased observer tonight at Robert Morris versus Penn State at PPG Paints Arena. Men's college hockey back at PPG Paints Arena a little bit earlier than usual. Typically, they have the Three Rivers Classic, which is hosted by Bobby Moe down there. That's after the Christmas holiday, but before New Year. This time, though, a special edition as the Pennsylvania rivalry gets rekindled and reignited. So kudos to both programs, to Derek Schooley of RMU and Guy Godowski of Penn State and the athletic directors there for getting this thing back together. I missed it. There was no RMU Penn State last year. And these two teams, to use the cliche, which I typically kill on this show, but they don't like each other very much. In fact, they tend to hate each other when they get on the rink. It is rather enjoyable. Two upstart programs, really, when you look at it. Two very new programs in the very traditional world of college hockey, Division I on the men's side. So I'll be down there at PPG Paints at 7 o'clock. I want to talk about that in our last segment of today's show. I'll be on for an hour, and hopefully I can get Alan Saunders to come on in. There's no person in Pittsburgh I'd rather talk college hockey with than him. Of course, he runs Pittsburgh Hockey Digest, which covers everything short of the Penguins here in town, all amateur hockey and some minor pro as well when relevant, when some Pittsburghers are active in those various leagues. So we'll get to that at the end of the show. But today's theme, overarching theme of the program, is hypocrisy. I'm going to tell you all the ways in which I suck, to paraphrase Chris Farley from back in the day on SNL. I'm not perfect. I know I criticize, I critique on social media with my day job at dkpittsburghsports.com. It's my job to pick things apart as Penguins beat reporter, as lead analyst. That's just what I do. So I understand that I'm going to get some blowback coming my way. I do my best to handle that and be very rational and calm when dealing with it. But I also have gotten emotional in the past week, and emotions can often lead you to do things that don't make a lot of sense otherwise, that aren't logically sound. And, well, there are two parts of every person, right? There's the logical side, and there's the emotional side. And that can create some situations where your actions aren't terribly coherent with some of the things you might say or some of the values you may profess to have. And there are three ways this week in which I felt like a big old hypocrite. So we'll get to all three of those, including one that came into play last night at PPG Paints Arena. The Penguins took on the New York Islanders, just your run-of-the-mill Metropolitan Division matchup, right? Well, it was also Star Wars night, and there were some people who didn't like the fact that there was some sci-fi fantasy mixed with their very serious hockey, very serious NHL, very serious Pittsburgh sports. I got upset at that. Maybe I shouldn't have. We'll talk about that later in the hour. Also, the paradox between hockey and football. If you watched the Steelers play the Bengals last Monday night, that was a bloodbath at Paul Brown Stadium in Cincinnati. It didn't make just me upset. It made a lot of you upset. It made you wonder whether you should be watching football. Well, there are other sports that we should be considering if we are going to hold football to that high of a standard. That's coming up as well. But in this opening segment, I'm going to talk individual sports, as I often do on this show. Last week, Tiger Woods made his latest comeback. It was his 10th comeback to the PGA Tour after, I believe, missing at least 10 weeks or so. Kind of an arbitrary milestone or arbitrary measuring stick, but the Golf Channel went with it, so I'm going to go with it too. Tiger is back, and I lose all rationality when Eldrick Woods gets back on the tee box. It's who I am. I grew up watching him. He's the reason why, number one, I play golf, or one of the main reasons, along with my grandfather. I'll give them co-credit there in getting me into this game, which can be equal turns joyful and eminently frustrating. But it's enriched my life. It's brought my family closer together, as I've talked about on this show before, particularly on my wife's side. So it's been a real productive thing in my life. And it's been really fun to watch who I believe to be the greatest golfer of all time, Tiger Woods, go about his business. I just like watching greatness at work. I don't think I'm alone in that one at all, and I don't think I'm alone in being excited if social media is any gauge, if the personalities on Golf Channel and NBC last week are any gauge. They're fired up too, because when Tiger's on the prowl, so to speak, golf gets a higher profile in the world of sports. You feel a little bit more like you're having a seat at the table, I think, if you're golf and if you are a golf fan. Typically, we're off in our little spots. We're in our niche. We're at the kiddie table, if you're going to use the Thanksgiving dinner analogy here. But when you get bumped up, when people are paying attention because there is such a telegenic and in many ways controversial star back on the playing field, that's enjoyable, and it gets the blood pumping a little bit more, especially when you see Tiger play like he did last week down at the Hero World Challenge in the Bahamas. It's a limited field event. It's not a full PGA Tour event for those of you who didn't watch, but Tiger Woods was piping it out there off the tee with the likes of Dustin Johnson's and Justin Thomas and Ricky Fowler and Jordan Spieth, all the young stars of today's game. Boy, if he could get it going and keep it going, Tiger that is, it would be quite the clash of generations. And it warmed my heart to see a lot of these younger players talk about growing up, and many of these players my own age and younger talking about growing up, watching Woods play and inspiring them with his exploits. And if you're under the age of 25, maybe you don't remember it that well. I'm 32. It was right in my wheelhouse as a sports fan. You care a little bit more about sports when you're between the ages of, I don't know, I'll say 12 and 22, when you don't have a career, when you don't have a family outside of the one you were born into, when you don't have a lot of other concerns that can take you away from the sports. At those ages, those are formational ages, and that's where so many of our allegiances and our deep feelings regarding sports are planted, and I've experienced that myself. So I can't get Tiger out of my head, even though, obviously, I'm someone who tries to treat people the way I want to be treated. I consider myself a family man. I'm devoted to my wife and my son, and to see Tiger tear his family apart about 10 years ago with the serial infidelities. And I'm not about to get into all the details, but you know that Tiger Woods misbehaved, at least within the framework of his marriage and his family. And to see him go through that was a tough thing, because you feel like you get to know these guys and gals on the big sports stage, even though we really don't. But in these individual sports especially, when you cheer for a person more so than a team, I think that makes it even more of a challenge when these people go through the difficulties that strike a lot of us in life. Well, we all face trials and tribulations, don't we, and hurdles to climb over in our lives. But to see Tiger put himself through that and to have those conflicted feelings, I don't know how I felt about seeing him return to golf in 2010 and 2011. And even in 2013, he was PGA Tour Player of the Year. People act like he wasn't the same after he came back. Well, no, I don't put too much credence into the mental block that people think he has ever since he ran his SUV into the fire hydrant in his development down in Central Florida. Was it Thanksgiving night of 2009? Yes, how could I forget that? I think it's more about his body breaking down and some of the injuries he's sustained. Well, his back is fused together, and he's got his club head speed back. He's drilling it out there, like I said. Looked like the Tiger of old in that way. He has some short game to polish up. But to see him back out there, maybe try to rekindle, or it automatically rekindled the warm feelings I had toward him. And then I think am I a hypocrite for following this guy who, by all accounts, isn't the greatest person, I suppose, or at least, I hate to paint with that broad of a brush, but he wasn't a very responsible husband and father, and he's trying to get his life back together. It was really touching to see his kids on the course wearing his signature red shirt last Sunday down in the Bahamas, wearing a black hat, trying to look like dad, his son and his daughter. That was really cool to see. So I'm in the bag for Tiger, obviously, but there are times like that where he comes back and I see the blowback on social media from people who I like and respect, who say, I could never follow Tiger again, or he's done. Why is he trying to do this? Well, I believe in Tiger Woods. I believe in his ability to get back. And is it selfish of me to say I just want to see him have one nice run again, to compete at a few majors, to get me standing on my couch, watching him try to line up a big putt to win a tournament? That's all I want. I don't want too much out of this whole Tiger Woods experience. So I'm unabashedly loving it. And I'm diving all the way in. I'm diving past all the ideas that maybe I should stop following him because of what he's done in his life or the way he's treated people. For me, that's 8 years ago. He might not be the perfect human being. None of us are. But I'm not going to apologize for getting back on board the Tiger Woods bandwagon. And you shouldn't either, I don't think. We all have to reconcile this within our own minds, don't we? And we've all followed people on the sports scene who we've made heroes of. Your Michael Jordans, your LeBron Jameses, your Sidney Crosbys. These aren't perfect people. These aren't maybe necessarily people you'd even like if you ran into on the street. I don't know if you'd even be friends with these people. But that's the beauty of sports, isn't it? We can watch from afar. We can appreciate from afar. We can project ourselves into these positions and wonder how in the world could we pull that off? Could we be that great? Can we be that great in our daily lives? I think they're inspirational. That's a huge part of the reason why I'm a sports fan, is to see the limits of human accomplishment, to see how far people can take these limited bodies that we have and limited minds that we have and perform at the highest level. That's exciting to me. That's what's thrilling to me. That's why, for instance, I'm not the biggest fan of underdogs, especially in individual sports. I want to see the big boys and girls go at it. I want to see Tiger Woods and Roger Federer and Rafa Nadal and Novak Djokovic on the tennis side. I want to see Dustin Johnson win several U.S. Opens and majors and go as far and take his talent as far as it can go. That's what's exciting to me, not seeing some person come out of nowhere. That's nice once in a while. It can make for compelling stories, and it can really mix things up as far as the narratives go. But overall, I want to see the stars. You want to see the names that you always see listed on the marquee. You want to see them doing well. I think that applies for the world of music. It applies for movies. And it also applies in the world of sports. It's all entertainment. And when you have these recurring characters that continue to show up, I think that's great for not just sports, but for us to know that you can sustain something over the long term. And golf is the most forgiving of all those sports. You can play pretty darn good golf well into your 40s, and that's my hope as a Tiger Woods fanboy, signed, sealed, and delivered, that he can do that. What is he, 41? I think about to turn 42 at the end of this month. It would be quite the thrill. I'm embracing it, even though you might think, well, Matt, don't you try to be a responsible family man? Yeah, I can follow Tiger Woods and also acknowledge that he hasn't been perfect off the golf course. Thank you for watching and listening to Geick's Got Game here on the River's Edge. It's my pleasure to be with you. This is Matt Geica. More to come in this hour. We're talking football and perhaps an unfair higher standard that's being applied to it when it comes to the safety of the athletes and wanting to see these guys continue on and have fulfilling lives after they're done entertaining us for a living. Keep it right here.
Hi, I'm Rob Spear, host of Damn Near Killed Him, an interview show where anything goes.
Once they gave it to me, you could have stuck a telephone pole up my ass.
I was about to be, kicked out of the country.
That's where they send the worst of the worst.
In a psych ward, normal things seem so weird in there.
He was making $5,000 a month doing gay audiobooks.
Hear some stories from people who have been to the edge and back. Thursday morning at 9 a.m. on riversedgepgh.com or download on iTunes.
I mean, that's some pretty cool shit.
And we are back on the River's Edge. Brian Crawford on the ones and twos to my left. I am Matt Geica. I'm in front of the microphone. They let me do it again. I can't believe it. Nearing 100 episodes of Gike's Got Game. I've been at this for, more than 2 years, since the summer of 2015. We started off down the road at Millvale Studio. We've moved up the hill. What is this, on Evergreen Road, I believe, in Millvale?
It is,
yeah,
yes.
See, I know my geography around here. I'm getting to know this lovely little hamlet tucked into the western Pennsylvania hills. And Brian, I wanted to bring you in for the second segment, so you can keep your mic on if you don't mind.
Definitely. Well, the first segment, I just wanted to bring up, you mentioned about Tiger Woods and trying to...
Yeah, right.
With his issues. I figured, I just thought I'd bring it up, that the whole point of that segment, at least in my mind, what I'm grasping is not everyone can be Brian Crawford.
Well, yeah.
So you got to lower your expectations for some people.
We can't be excellent in every area of life like Brian Crawford. Pittsburgh's Moral Compass coming to you with River Talk weekly on this radio station. Brian, did you watch Steelers-Bengals on Monday night?
I did not.
You did not? Okay.
No.
So, but
I came here. I was right next door at the Funhouse. So,
oh, okay. Yeah. What was going on down here? A little concert?
Acoustic Cafe, yeah.
Little show? Okay. Well, I'm sure you saw the aftermath, all the controversy. First of all, Ryan Shazier.
Yeah, that's crazy.
God bless him. I hope that he's able to at least walk at some point. He's suffering through a spinal cord injury from a tackle, routine tackle, really. That's what's scary about that. It wasn't anything that was out of the ordinary, but lost feeling in his lower body for at least a while, put his career and possibly his functional life in jeopardy. So that really brings things into sharp relief as far as how dangerous of a sport it can be. But then you had the head-to-head hits from Juju Smith-Schuster and George Iloka of the Bengals. Smith-Schuster suspended for one game. Iloka initially was, and then the suspension was rescinded. I'm not here to talk about NFL discipline because I probably couldn't figure it out if I filibustered for 3 hours. But I do want to talk about how I feel people are slowly being turned off on the NFL because of the violence, because of what we know about brain injuries and how it can affect quality of life down the line. I know I have. I know I care less about football than I did 5 years ago because I feel like, should I be supporting this? Should I be thinking about this? Should I be consuming this product when I know what it does to players down the line? And I realize, Brian, that these players pretty much know that it's a dangerous sport for the most part. If you don't, you'd have to be pretty stupid at this point. So does that make it okay for you? Does that give your reasoning more of an opening to watch it, to pay attention to it, and not feel guilty about it? Because I have a hard time with it, to be honest.
In 2017, yes. If this was back in the day, then no. Back in the day when these guys were misled on information and things like that, I thought that was atrocious. It did open them up to a lawsuit because it's bad
we're still seeing the
work practices. I mean, nowadays, you know the risk you're taking when you go into it, so I feel bad. I kind of got less into the NFL because of the way the players reacted to people who aren't on the field and a lot of the stuff that went on off the field, like dragging people out of elevators and drug busts and things like that. And that's really what turned me off of the NFL, because it's kind of like the whole motorcycle helmet thing. If you decide not to wear a helmet, you're putting yourself in harm's way, but you decide not to use turn signals and you confuse someone behind you, then you're putting other people in harm's way. And I always feel like, if you want to screw yourself over, that's your call. But when you start hurting other people, that's when I really get upset. So,
well, when I really thought about it this week, if I'm holding football to this higher standard, there are hockey players who've had issues with concussions. Sidney Crosby here in town. I hope that he doesn't have anything down the line, but you never know. Eric Lindros had to quit because of concussion. So it's not like, and then you have the enforcers, the fighters who had to self-medicate and in some cases killed themselves. In the case of Derek Bugard, and I believe Bob Probert passed away too. He was a great fighter of yesteryear. So these guys entertained us, or at least entertain some people. I've never been a big fan of the fighting at all, but they put themselves out there and then they pay the ultimate price in that way. So I wonder, am I holding football to too high of a standard? Am I saying, I don't like what's going on in football, so I'm going to tune out on it, when you could have any kind of a brain injury occur in hockey, in, mixed martial arts, especially boxing, all sports that I have watched and enjoyed it at certain points of my history. Maybe I'm being a hypocrite there by just saying, well, I just like hockey better, or I just like another sport better than I do football.
Well, I think maybe one of the things is maybe we should hold these leagues to a higher standard for care after players retire. I think that might be something that we should really look into, where these people go through these traumatic issues and they are getting into dark places mentally. Maybe there should be some sort of counseling set up for these guys. Maybe it should be something where they're just checked in on, and they're not.
I think they're working on it in some.
They don't just
areas,
disappear. Yeah, and that might be maybe the route to go. I personally am not a big fan of the fighting either in hockey.
It's going away. It's really non-existent
it's starting
these
to
days.
go away. Yeah, in a big way.
Just because it's almost organically. I've been proud of the sport because it's taken on more of a fast, skilled persona, if you will.
Can't we blame the Penguins for some of that,
bulky
too?
and big and hard-hitting. Yeah, I think that's part of it. Sure. You see what works. The Chicago Blackhawks did a similar thing. The Tampa Bay Lightning when they made the final. Yeah, it's a copycat situation, right? Whoever has success, it applies in sports and life. You tend to emulate those teams. And I think it's also training, too. Training has made athletes faster and more explosive, so you can't have these big lumbering enforcers out there on the ice anymore because they're going to get blown past. And
also in hockey, the fact that they shrunk the size of the rink, that didn't help to deter injuries, really. I can't imagine when you've got these huge guys in this small
I've heard the
rink.
argument that they should expand the rink to Olympic dimensions. I don't know if that helps as much. It might help a little bit to give more room. But I also, here's where I'm a hypocrite again, because I like when bodies and pucks are funneled into small areas. It's fun. I like the pinball nature, the kind of randomness that comes from that. But at the same time, am I willing to accept that leads to at least a slighter increased chance of injury? I guess I am. Maybe the point of this show today, Brian, is that we're all willing to make compromises. And where is the line? Where do you go? Am I turned off on football just because I'm just not that big of a fan of the sport as I am of other sports? Or is it really because I'm disturbed by the state of players when they come out of the game? Or in the case of Ryan Shazier, who is still in the game, at least right now, having his life changed because of just the nature of the sport. Like I said, that was a routine tackle. We could argue that his form was not good enough and he shouldn't have led with his head, but that could happen in any game from Pop Warner all the way up to the pros. So that's when I started to get concerned. And I've said in the past, I'm not going to let my kids play football. I am not going to patronize it as I have in the past. I haven't bought a bit of memorabilia related to the NFL in a long time because of this. And part of that was actually due to what you were talking about, the Ray Rice domestic violence situation.
Well, there's an entire database, Matt, that exists.
Yeah, it's not just him.
But I mean,
that was the tipping point, though.
You can actually Google NFL crime database, and there's an entire database of crimes committed by NFL players in just the 2000s alone. Enough to create a database, and the argument always is, oh, well, there's less crimes committed by NFL players than the general public, but they're all millionaires. The average public that's committing crimes, most of those people they don't have the money to feed an addiction that they got from their doctor with the opioids, or they can't put food.
Right there.
Yeah, they can't put food on the table or something like that. A multimillionaire doesn't have those same kind of problems. So to me, that's not a fair comparison. To me, you look at other millionaires. Do you see other millionaires out there engaging in petty theft?
I have no idea.
I imagine bigger theft. They're probably screwing people over and, like Enron type of stuff.
Right.
But
white collar crime.
Yeah.
That's just as bad in some cases, if not worse. Well, that brings into the conversation a cultural discussion here, because in a lot of ways, football is a way out for some of these guys from a tough situation, and we've seen that over and over again. Just because of the socioeconomics of the sport, you can get into it. You can play it pretty cheaply at the high school level. It's not like hockey or lacrosse where you have to buy a lot of equipment, so you can get into it rather easily. And in a lot of ways, Brian, it's tough to leave unsavory aspects of your former culture behind, totally, too.
Yeah.
You have people who are depending on you suddenly, and you don't want to cut them loose financially. You want to support your friends and your family.
Well, maybe that's where college football could come into play. I mean, they don't want to treat these guys like professionals and pay them.
Mm-hmm.
And the argument
which they
is,
should, by
which
the way.
they should, yeah. But the argument is,
that.
they're kids and they're getting an education and this and that. Well, if you're going to give them an education, then maybe you should give them a real education and and maybe teach them, not to get
I think
into
they
that
try,
kind of crap.
Brian. I really think they do. And I'm not saying that anybody has the cross interests of players in mind. I think for the most part, your coaches at the college level, they're trying. At the high school level, they're trying to corral these young athletes and impressionable minds, and at least set them on the straight and narrow when necessary. So there's no easy answer to these things.
No.
I suppose that's why we can discuss them endlessly, and that's why I love talking about it, because you can almost. A lot of times I come on this show, Brian, and other shows, and I don't know what I think until I start talking about it. So it's good to have a dialogue, and I think
I agree. Well, I think that's one of the
important
great things about talk radio is I like to have a flexible show where you have a framework, but you can have
same
a
here.
dialogue, and so I agree.
All right. So do you watch the Steelers every week when you can? Or are you still on board with that?
I kind of watch it if there's stuff going on, like if I don't know if
there's a party or a
if
get-together?
it's a party or
Yeah.
I'm out somewhere eating, I'll watch it if it's on. But with just everything going on in my life, I don't take that time like I used to when I was younger. I used to take that, I'd set aside those hours every Sunday
Me
and
too.
watch the Steelers. And now I watch it when I can, and that's pretty much what I do. If I'm available, like I watch it if it's on, but I'm not scheduling my day around it either.
See, I have to. In my
Yeah,
job at the
for sure.
website, I have to at least be competent in commenting on it. I host videos and podcasts, and I go on WPXI occasionally. And if the show's all about Steelers, I got to know about the Steelers. So,
Absolutely.
But if I didn't have to know, I think I might have tuned the NFL out completely by now. I just feel I have enough going on. And like I said in the first segment, when family comes in, I have a 1-year-old now at home.
Absolutely. Well, that's like this business is
it
the
takes up a
similar
huge
thing.
part
I
of
mean,
your
obviously,
life.
a child is a much bigger
Well, this is
deal
your
in the
baby.
sense that,
This is,
exactly.
You have joint custody with a couple other people.
Yeah. But one of the things that I really do love about the NFL, and this is the only thing that keeps me coming to the NFL every year, is I don't sit there and watch all the games. A lot of times I don't watch the game at all, but I love the people in the media that surround the NFL.
Okay.
And I love listening to their commentary, and I love the storylines, and I love a lot of that stuff, especially on the local level. A lot of the people who are local in sports media. And it seems like it just becomes more fun at NFL time because there's all of these societal pulls that come in. And not that I obviously I've kind of backed off of the NFL because of a lot of these issues. But the actual talk, I feel like the sports talk is raised to a higher level because now these hosts have to talk about these societal problems instead of just X's and O's and this and that, because you've got such a diverse group of people and different cultures clashing and things like that in the NFL. So it creates, to me, a more interesting discussion.
I totally agree with that. It makes it more of a vital discussion. I've loved this year because we've seen the players stand up for certain things, or in some cases kneel for certain things.
Sure.
But it's made us talk about these things instead of just be discussing X's and O's.
And isn't
for
that so much more
2
interesting
hours
on
before a
sports
game.
radio than somebody's fantasy team? Like the last thing I want to hear
Don't get
when
me
I
started about fantasy. Jeez. There's a local station who has a fantasy segment, and boy, do I click the
Yes.
station over as quick as possible. No offense to you if you play fantasy, but I don't care about your team. You don't care about my team if I have
And
one.
let's be honest, you're not a real GM. There's a big difference between sitting down there and looking at numbers and actually dealing with personalities and individuals.
Oh, my goodness. That's maybe one thing I've learned the most working in the business covering Pittsburgh sports now. When I was on the outside, Brian, I always thought, well, you move this player to that, you trade him here. But you have to have these discussions with real people. And to make things work in a team setting, to have leadership,
It's like managing
more
a business.
difficult than that.
You've got personalities there. Anybody who's been a manager, or even if you don't run a business, if you're just a low level front end supervisor at a grocery store, you've got cashiers and baggers that won't work together at the grocery mart, and
It happens,
You've
yeah.
got all sorts of personalities to deal with, and I know like. At my job, it kind of sucks because if you're a decent employee, they'll put you with the worst of the group because they're thinking that you'll at least balance the other person out.
That reminds me of school. Wow, they always put me next to the struggling student because I tended to do pretty well in school, and I'd always see them sneaking looks over my shoulder during tests too. That was always fun. Or can you tell me the answers, Matt? No, I'm not going to tell you the answers.
Yeah.
Do it yourself, moron. All right, let's finish on a dark note. We'll take a break. I'll calm down, splash myself with some water, And we're going to talk Star Wars when we come back from this break, believe it or not, and Penguins hockey and the intermingling of both. This is Guy's Got Game on the River's Edge.
The Double L Bar, Grant Avenue, Millville, Pennsylvania, reminding you that you're listening to the River's Edge Radio Network.
Yes, inside Mr. Small's Theater in lovely Millville, Pennsylvania. This is Guy's Got Game, and I'm your host, Matt Geica. In fact, Millville is home to 2 internet radio stations now, River's Edge and the Metal Edge. On top of that, if you like your music a little bit harder, a little bit dirtier, a little bit more in your face, then the Metal Edge might be for you. So give that a look. And the River's Edge, of course, showcasing local music and local talk at riversedgepgh.com. We're on Facebook Live, too. If you're watching that way, thank you very much. Brian Crawford's alongside. Brian, we got a comment on our discussion regarding football and reasons to watch or not watch. Alex Tinker, I couldn't pull up on my screen, so I'm going to have to look at your screen. Alex Tinker saying that there are fewer crimes committed by professional football players compared to the general population is like saying I played chess with a dog and I beat the dog 3 out of 5. You may have won 3, but the dog still won 2. Well, that's a really sad performance on your part if you can't beat a dog 5 straight times at chess. The pros may not commit as many crimes as the general population, but there is still a massive problem. Well, yeah, there's a problem in society regarding that. And I will say proportionally, it is true that NFL players commit fewer crimes than the general population, but like Brian was saying, there are differences in, well, certainly income, first and foremost.
Interesting
when it
point
comes to that.
About Alex. He has got some history here.
Does he?
Alex was actually the first musician to perform live on the River's Edge.
Okay. Is he a solo artist or with a band?
He was a solo artist at the time. He moved to Washington, D.C., so I'm not sure if he still is solo or if he's with a band, but he was solo at the time, and he actually performed in the Closet Attic Studio, which I just announced last week on my show. It is deceased. They tore down the studio for remodeling.
So thank you, Alex, and thank you for that very interesting dog playing chess comparison. I'll have to think about that one a little bit more to gain greater insight. We're talking today about how I felt like a hypocrite as a sports consumer, as a sports media personality, as a sports fan. I consider myself to be all 3 at varying points, and sometimes several of those simultaneously. This time, I don't think I have been a hypocrite, but maybe you might believe differently. Last night at PPG Paints Arena, it was Star Wars night. Yes, a very blatant money grab by Disney. They're bringing these Star Wars nights to all these arenas and ballparks around the country. The Pirates had one this past year. It all has a very corporate sheen, even though if you're like me and you really enjoy Star Wars, it's the one sci-fi fantasy thing that I like, people. So let me have this. And in fact, new movie coming out later this month. I'll be one of the first in line to see it in theaters. So it takes me back to my childhood. I was talking about you get your sports allegiances burned into your brain as a kid, maybe into your later teen years and early adult years as well. Star Wars is right there for me. I started watching it when the old ones were re-released. You might remember this in the late 90s, and then the new movies came out. Yes, I realized the prequels weren't quite as solid as the original trilogy, but I was heartened by Episode 7. We'll see how Episode 8 is coming up. Anyway, neither here nor there. It was Star Wars night at PPG Paints. There were Tusken Raiders, there were Stormtroopers, there was Chewie, there was Princess Leia, Qui-Gon Jinn, Boba Fett, Darth Vader, of course, how could I forget him? The real C-3PO was there, as in the actor who plays C-3PO, Anthony Daniels, and there was Darth Maul. In fact, that was Dan Potash of AT&T Sportsnet, dressed rather convincingly as Darth Maul. He even got yellow contacts to go with the whole outfit. I thought it was incredible. Watching Darth Maul interview Mike Sullivan before the game might have been my highlight of the season. They show the TV feed up in the press box. I was covering the game last night, but I was able to at least see it without sound. That's high comedy, my friends, and I give Mike credit for at least trying to stick to his talking points during that one. But I noticed that there were several, not just in the local media, but also just fans saying, oh, what is this? Don't mix Star Wars with my hockey. Give me my hockey. it's game 30 of 82. We can have a little bit of fun, first of all. And this was so remarkably tame compared to theme nights you'll see in the minor leagues or in junior hockey. In my case, I've worked a couple of years at that level too. I feel like people in Pittsburgh don't quite understand what sports are like away from the big stage. You got to sell no matter what the product is on the field, which typically a lot of times in the minors it's not very good or it's inconsistent. It's not the quality of Major League sports. So you got to get people in the ballpark or in the arena any way you can. And I find increasingly fans of Major League sports are, I don't know if it's just social media or our decreased attention spans, but they're getting a little bit bored with the traditional sports presentation. There's nothing wrong with mixing it up. Typically, yeah, I'm more of a traditionalist, and I'm there for the hockey. I wouldn't be there at the game if the Penguins weren't playing, obviously. If I were a fan or if I were a media member, that's what I'm there for, is to cover the sport. But I like Star Wars. Maybe I'm biased, but I thought it was just some good, harmless fun there at PPG Paints last night. But I was embarrassed by the blowback from some of our local media personalities, from like I said, some of the fans getting on Dan Potash for dressing like Darth Maul. I would applaud the commitment, and I was endlessly amused by it. Maybe that's just my own perspective, but maybe I'm being a hypocrite in that way because, like I said, I'm a traditionalist usually, or I'm more of a purist. I just like the sports, but I can also appreciate when you mix and match, and I can appreciate that maybe Star Wars night helped get some different types of fans in the building, heaven forbid, for the Penguins, who had to think about when Crosby and Malkin and Chris Letang and all their stars retire and move on, you still have to get people in the building after that. And maybe if a fan in 2022 says, well, yeah, the Penguins aren't so good anymore, but man, I really had a good time at Star Wars night, or I had a good time when I came to the building for Star Wars night, and then I watched the hockey. It turned out to be a really entertaining game against the Islanders, and I fell in love with the sport that way. For me, there's no bad way to get people in the building and watching your product. And there was no interference with the actual product. The Penguins didn't wear Star Wars jerseys like would definitely happen at the minor league level in the AHL and the ECHL. If you follow the AHL Penguins up in Wilkes-Barre, Scranton, if you follow the Wheeling Nailers, if you're a fan of Penguins prospects, which many of our subscribers at DK Pittsburgh Sports are, then you know that a lot of times it gets a little goofy or silly, and you just go on with it. You swallow hard if you're a purist, or if you really like the theme night, which I did last night. I thought it was sweet. I was nerding out, definitely, and feeling like a kid again, seeing all these characters. I got a photo with the Tusken Raider, a little bit scary, and the Stormtroopers. That was pretty cool. So it broke up the monotony for me. It broke up the monotony, I think, for a lot of the people around the Penguins, for Dan Potash especially. And I found it especially unsavory to pick on Potash there. He's trying to get into the spirit, and I think you should applaud something like that. Someone who's thinking outside the box and willing to sit in a makeup chair for hours just to make the night more interesting and to buy in and to be an entertainer. Again, heaven forbid we entertain in this case. And in some cases, the hockey isn't good enough. Last night in the third period and overtime especially, it was. But we should not begrudge people who are in the entertainment industry, which is what sports is, for trying to entertain us and to get a bigger tent, to make a bigger tent and get more people on the bandwagon, no matter what it takes. So I can look past the corporate nature of Star Wars, owned by Disney now. You can definitely see them putting things out into different parts of the culture and trying to get more people on board. Yeah, it's a little bit contrived and artificial, but hey, no one's getting hurt. It's fine. We can all move on and get on with our lives without acting like we were violated by seeing the sideline reporter dress up like a Sith Lord. This is Gike's Got Game on the River's Edge. Yeah, put it that way. That's a nice way to finish the segment. When I come back, we're going to talk real hockey, college hockey. Hopefully I can get Alan Saunders on the line. He's busy with a bit of an engagement over on the Pitt campus. Pat Narduzzi signing a new contract, a new extension as head football coach of the Panthers. We'll see if I can pull him away from that and talk about his real passion, which is hockey and college hockey. Penn State and RMU tonight at PPG Paints Arena.
Hey River's Edge listeners, Alex here from the Mike Sasson Show, and boy have I got to tell you about Salon 22, a small local business located right here in Millville. I got my hair colored there about 2 weeks ago, and I still can't stop staring at myself. They use this awesome new technique called color melting to make me look like a mermaid. But don't worry, if mermaid hair isn't your thing, they'll meet all your hair goals, with things like balayage, rose gold, unicorn hair, ombre, as well as monochromatic color, which is your standard basic coloring. Seriously, they do it all, and they do it good. Check Salon 22 out on Facebook and mention this ad when you make your appointment to receive a free color lock service to help preserve your color. It's a $20 value for free. I'm not kidding. Book your appointment now by calling 412-822-7222. That's 412-822-7222.
And we are back. Final segment of Gike's Got Game. In a past life, I've called this the overtime segment, so why not? We'll keep it going with the hockey theme. We are talking college hockey because the rekindling of the RMU-Penn State rivalry begins in earnest. This evening, Friday night, PPG Paints Arena, 7 o'clock on the big stage, Colonials and Nittany Lions. I'll be there for DK Pittsburgh Sports, and my guest at this time will be there for Pittsburgh Hockey Digest. His name is Alan Saunders. You know him as the fill-in host and oftentimes guest on this program. Alan, I'm excited about this. This should be great. I'm really fired up that they made a way to not just play each other once, but to have a nice home-and-home series as they'll get together on Saturday up at Pagula Ice Arena in State College.
Yeah, I feel like that's the way it should be. I liked having Penn State in the Three Rivers Classic, and I thought they were an important part of that tournament. But I think it's fun when you play the home and home. You get to go on the road. Pagula's a nice building. It's a fun place to play. So that'll be good for the Robert Morris players going up there. And it's an opportunity for Robert Morris to kind of show off its team on a big stage as just a regular season game. Mm-hmm. And I think that's big for them. So, yeah, I'm really glad that they found a way to play. And also, I think it's a legitimate rivalry. I was talking to some of the former players this week, and there's some dislike there. I'm interested to see after 1 year hiatus if it's still there. But it's been some passionate hockey, and that's always good to see.
Well, trust me, as a former employee of Robert Morris University and working with the men's hockey team, yeah, there is some dislike there between RMU and Penn State, and that helps. That helps a lot. Well, first of all, there's some parallels between the two programs. They're both pretty young programs when it comes to traditional college hockey. We're talking about schools like Michigan and all the schools out east, and all these tradition-bound programs in this sport that have been around forever. And then you have these two teams from Western Pennsylvania, I guess you could call it, or the western half of Pennsylvania, and they get it going. They each have varying levels of success, so there's some of that too. Each team wants to own its territory and own this recruiting base, which has become increasingly fruitful over the years. What, just from the hockey perspective, are you looking forward to tonight? I know it hasn't been the smoothest road for the Colonials. Typically, they're doing a bit better at this point of the season, and actually Penn State's had its struggles too after a breakthrough into the NCAA tournament last year. So what do you think you might see as far as the competitive level and how these teams might match up literally on the ice?
Yeah, I think for Penn State, it's interesting because and like you said, it's a young program, and for the most part they haven't scheduled the most challenging of non-conference schedules. And the way the Big Ten schedule lined up, that meant that at about this time of the year, Penn State had, they were like 12-0, or they just had a really good record at this point in the year every year because they were playing a weak schedule, and they hadn't played any Big Ten games yet. Well, the Big Ten, with the addition of Notre Dame this year, who's joined the Big Ten for hockey, they're playing a more balanced schedule. So Penn State's played some Big Ten games. They've lost some Big Ten games. They had some struggles, but they're playing pretty good hockey coming in. They have points in 6 straight and just took care of a pretty good Ohio State team. So I think that it's actually a Penn State team that's maybe, if you say, well, maybe they're down a little bit, but I think this is actually sort of par for the course. It's just that we're not used to seeing them at this place at this point in the season. And if anything, they're maybe a little bit more battle tested than the typical Penn State teams that we've seen play Robert Morris in December when maybe they hadn't really played anybody very good yet. And so there was this question of, well, is Penn State as good as their record indicates? Now I think, yeah, they're the number 18 team in the country, and I think that's pretty reflective of their record and the way they've played. They're a good team. They're deserving of that national ranking, and there's no sort of artificial inflation about it. As far as Robert Morris goes, I think it's been a really tough year for them in terms of just meeting expectations. I think that last season they did the opposite, right? Everyone sort of thought that was going to be a down year for that team. And they didn't have very many seniors. They played a lot of freshmen. They had a freshman goaltender. Nobody ever knows what's going to happen there. There were a lot of question marks. And the answers to all those questions seemed pretty positive. Robert Morris had a very good year. They end up in the Atlantic Hockey Final. And this season, as a result, they were picked, I think, second in the conference almost unanimously. And, it's just not quite there. And I think that's one of the things that maybe – myself and the other people that do that type of prognosticating overlooked is that, yeah, they had 10 freshmen last year that did pretty well, but that just means there are 10 sophomores this year. And
still young, yeah.
It's still young. Just because they had a good year last year, they're still a pretty young team. And so I just think we're seeing some inconsistency, especially when it comes to players playing in bigger roles than they have in the past. And making that adjustment when you go from, I'm the freshman on the line that's just expected to kind of skate up and down the right wing and do my job. And now all of a sudden, there's a whole scoring line full of guys that are in their second year, and they're expected to find a way to produce and to outscore to be the reason that Robert Morris wins a game, as opposed to just going out there doing their job. And it's difficult. Francis Murata's not had as good of a year as he did as a freshman. These things happen. But it's not like they've gotten themselves in some sort of huge hole that they need to climb out of. It's just that they're not quite as good as people thought they would be. And so it's interesting because if you look at where they are at this point in the season versus where they've been at this point over the last few years, it's down a little bit, but it's not, to me, it's not anything concerning. But it is not as good as people thought, and that I think has been the thing that they've kind of battled against is that they've not played themselves out of contention by any stretch of the imagination, but they've not played themselves up to the level that people thought they could, and that tends to lend itself to a negative perception.
Well, to see them at 5-9-1 overall and 5-7-1 overall, that's a weird look. The Colonials don't typically have a losing record. That's just how it's gone in the past several years. Although, if you are a Colonials fan, you point to 2013-14 when they came into the Three Rivers Classic with, I believe, 2 victories, and then went on to win the Atlantic Hockey Tournament and make the NCAA tournament for still the only time in program history. And as for Penn State, yes, they are ranked. I don't mean to say they're way down, but to see them with 7 losses on their credit, on their record in 18 games, yeah, that makes you think maybe that they've faced some challenges. But like you said, maybe that's a good thing for Guy Godowski's program. At any rate, we will see them face it off twice in 2 days. That's good for everyone involved in this area who likes to watch good quality Division I college hockey. Thanks, Ellen. We're out of time. That's a short chat by our standards, so I appreciate you carving out some time as always, though.
No problem. Thanks, Matt.
That's Alan Saunders. I will see him at the rink. Hope to see you at the rink tonight at PPG Paints. If not, I'll see you again next week at this time on the River's Edge. This has been Guy's Got Game.